Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has a field day at the White House press briefing. Are we getting closer to a deal with Iran? It's sounding more optimistic than usual. And meet the depressed. Old guard media lament they've lost their power. It's Friday, May 29th, and this is news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Hello and welcome in to Heartlander News. I'm Chris Stigall. Yesterday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent took to the White House podium while Caroline Leavitt is away on maternity leave. It was his turn, and he had a lot of fun. We'll get into much more of it in a little bit. But first, the most recent findings on a potential ceasefire deal with Iran. 5 things to know about a tentative ceasefire deal, writes The Hill. Strait of Hormuz reopening, prices, you might have noticed this, oil prices seem to be precipitously falling. Nuclear specifics to be determined, they say. Here's some of what Scott Bessent had to say from the White House podium on it.
That there is a tentative deal that has been agreed for a 60-day extension of the ceasefire and then a continuation of nuclear talks.
Again, it's always a mistake to get out ahead of the president, so it is all going to be the president's decision. I think that we can see that the president very clearly stated his 3: the open the strait, highly enriched uranium, no nuclear program. So
those things temporary deal, right?
Yeah, listen, bottom line here, if you told any foreign policy expert 10 years ago that large swaths of the Arab world would one day be quietly and sometimes openly lining up with Israel against Iran, you would have been laughed out of the room. They'd have laughed in your face. It's almost impossible to imagine we're here if you really stop and consider it. Even though a deal's not been struck yet, just consider. This was never the trajectory that the elites ever imagined could be in the Middle East. Under Barack Obama, for instance, America's strategy in the Middle East was all about accommodating Iran and putting heavy pressure on Israel. The 2015, for instance, handed Tehran sanctions relief, pallets of cash, international legitimacy, all of that. And they gave them time to push toward their nuclear weapons ambitions. Our actual allies left wondering if Washington still had their backs. And so what did that approach ultimately deliver, if that's the one you favored? Well, nothing good. More proxy wars, more rockets, Israel in a constant state of existential stress, and a far stronger and more dangerous Iranian regime that destabilized world oil prices and the entirety of the Middle East. As Marco Rubio often pointed out, if they had the nukes and the drone capability to defend themselves, there was no price too high to raise oil and punish the rest of us. And then Donald Trump came in, and he flipped the entire script. No apologies for standing with Israel, no fake daylight between America and our friends. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And then he delivered the Abraham Accords, something the experts swore could never happen. The UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan. These weren't just photo op signatures. They created real trade, real intelligence sharing, military cooperation, tech partnerships, tourism, investment. President Trump understood what the foreign policy establishment never did. The old fight wasn't mainly about Israel versus the Arabs anymore at all. It was actually about Iran. And the smartest way to handle Iran was to build a powerful coalition around a strong Israel. And that has been a game changer. Quiet, back-channel ties became very public partnerships. Sunni Arab states began to see Israel as a powerful partner against the real threat, Tehran. All because Trump was willing to lead with strength and clarity. So now let's look at where we stand today. If Iran's nuclear program is truly being rolled back, if the Strait of Hormuz is stabilizing, and again, I recognize these are ifs, if Tehran's power to intimidate the region is fading, and these things seem to be coming, then momentum is growing bigger and bigger for this alignment every passing day. Saudi Arabia feels it. Qatar feels it. Egypt and Jordan already understand it. The choice is becoming pretty clear. Align with growth, stability, technology, energy, and real security, or stay tied to a weakening Iranian regime that spreads nothing but misery under the guise of a theocracy. It is undeniable. The strategic map of the Middle East looks dramatically different today than it did under Obama and Biden, and that's simply because Donald Trump is back and orchestrating it all. This is historic change, and it seemed impossible not too long ago. But peace through strength isn't just a slogan when Trump puts it into action. Economic strength, military strength, smart leverage, tough deal making, that all creates clarity. And clarity creates alignment. And alignment creates stability. Right now, before our eyes, President Trump is helping shape a whole new order in the Middle East. And that, folks, is no small task. That's history. And one extraordinary detail coming out of these Iran negotiations that tells you a whole lot about how Trump thinks and why he negotiates differently from every modern president we've ever seen. From all indications, Trump team has been negotiating a framework with Iran, and it's been brought back to him. And now think about what most politicians would do at that moment. They'd sprint straight to the camera. They'd hold a giant signing ceremony. They'd flood television with triumphant speeches and dramatic music and declare that they'd achieved historic peace. The headlines would matter more than the truth. And you noticed what Scott Bessent said there. I'm not going to get ahead of the president. They're not ready yet. Trump is doing the opposite. He's slowing the process down. And that's really important here, because patience like that only exists when you know you hold a stronger hand and when you know how to play it. The point is, Donald Trump, better than most people, understands what real leverage is. And America's leverage over Iran did not appear overnight or magically. It was built deliberately for this very moment. Iran's military and naval capabilities badly degraded through sustained precision bombing. Economic sanctions squeezed the finances of Iran. Billions of their assets were frozen. Iran is no longer capable of projecting power across the Middle East. And just as important, Trump has transformed America into an energy superpower. Don't forget what he did in Venezuela. This matters more than most people realize. For decades, the Middle East held enormous leverage over the global economy because the world depended so heavily on its oil. But under Trump, America dramatically increased domestic production and exports. We stopped acting like an energy-starved country, begging hostile regimes for stability, and started acting like a dominant producer, capable of shaping global energy markets ourselves. That changes everything at the negotiating table. Iran needs relief far more than we need a quick deal. And Trump knows that. Tehran knows that. And because President Trump understands leverage, he's not rushing to sign something weak just to enjoy a week of positive headlines. He doesn't want another Obama-style agreement built around flimsy hopes and promises or delayed enforcement, sunset clauses, optimistic speeches. We've been through it all before, only to see it all collapse a few years later. Trump is thinking much bigger than that. He's looking at the next 50 years, not the next 50 days. The real objective here is not simply avoiding conflict for the short term. The real objective is long-term reordering of the Middle East. That's huge. We've already seen it starting to happen. I told you the Abraham Accords changed that region, with Arab nations who just openly refuse to cooperate with Israel now building economic ties and coordination. A strategic reality has really changed here. Iran has become the common threat to everyone in the region. And so imagine what happens if Iran emerges from this weaker economically and militarily, and they're permanently blocked from obtaining a nuclear weapon. You'd see all these Arab nations moving toward that normalization I spoke of. Trade, economic growth, less incentive for endless American military involvement, which we all want to see. Trump is a much bigger part of a much bigger vision than simply signing another temporary nuclear agreement for a 24-hour cable news cycle. And you know what, honestly, after decades of disastrous Middle East policy from both parties, isn't it refreshing to see an American president thinking strategically instead of putting on a little show with theatrics? Weak leaders rush because they don't know what they're doing beyond getting a few headlines. What's different about President Trump? Strategic thinking with leverage. And when you're strategic and you're holding the cards, you can afford to be patient. That's classic Trump. Pressure first, leverage at the negotiation table second, then the deal he wants. That comes third. It's not peace through wishful thinking. It's peace through overwhelming strength. It doesn't happen. It simply does not happen in 2026 without the greatest problem solver and deal maker and peacemaker the country has seen in a very, very long time, not since Reagan, I would argue, and that's President Trump. Meanwhile, Scott Bessent continued to tackle issues from the White House podium. I call him street tough Scott Bessent. I never thought a geeky president, a presidential appointment to the Treasury Department would be a star in terms of communication. And I say geeky lovingly because he's kind of a goofy guy. I love him though. It's hilarious. And he's the kind of guy that if people start heckling him on the street, he'll give it right back. So I call him street tough Scott Bessent, having none of the conversation about President Trump not caring about the midterms in 170. Take a listen to this.
Mr. Secretary, just to follow up.
No, in the White House.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. Given how much this upcoming midterm election will hinge on the economy, what did you think about President Trump's comments in the cabinet meeting yesterday saying he didn't care about the midterms?
So you're calling President Trump a statesman? You're saying that he is taking a statesmanlike position, that he has a core belief, and he believes that the most important thing is for Iran never to have a nuclear weapon. So I believe those things can be true, that we can do well in the midterms, that we perhaps have the makings of a deal here. And I believe that, and look, the economy, that it is challenging now, but unemployment is still low. Tax refunds were high, and consumer spending is still quite high. So in my private business over the years, I always looked at what were consumers doing, not what they were saying. And I'm in constant contact with the banks, and every income quintile is still doing well.
I really like the way Bessent answered that. So what you're saying is President Trump is behaving as a statesman. Again, when he says, I don't care about the midterms, it's not he doesn't care about the voter, or he doesn't care about the economy, or he doesn't care about the Republican Party. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is my deal making here with Iran is incredibly important. It's too important to simply think politically. So two things can be true. And by the way, the RNC is sitting on a mountain of cash courtesy of President Trump, while the Democrats are, I think, in the hole to the tune of $14-17 billion, million. I don't know. It's bad. Like, the Democrats don't have any money. The Republicans are flush with cash. So from just a strategic point of view, the Republican Party in the midterms, they're as fine as they're going to be. That'll take care of itself, Trump figures. But global realignment, as I just laid out, President Trump can't afford, with something this big looming with Iran, he can't afford to think small ball politics. That was the whole point of what I was just saying, and I was glad Bessent confirmed it there. Here's a little more. Scott Bessent calling out the media. This is always fun. He's actually brought receipts when a member of the Washington Post throws a question at him, and he said, I'm glad you brought that up because I brought your little garbage story along with me. Take a listen to this.
I don't really understand this Washington Post article. That who hears from the Post? Yep. Terribly written, terribly edited. Because basically what it says is that Treasury is following the law, and that we've created the bill, and that it's up to Congress, but that we follow the bill and it's up to. I didn't really understand what the story was. But anyway.
Aren't involved in that, 2 of your political appointees?
Yeah, of course, but we prepare for everything if it gets passed.
Second,
Just like we were ready 6 months in advance for the one big beautiful bill for tax guidance. I don't really understand this.
I don't really understand your garbage story. I brought it along because I anticipated you'd ask me about it. Of course, they're talking about, if you didn't hear about it, the $250 bill. You may not have known that. It's kind of funny, and I sort of love it. I mean, I have to admit, even if it's not real, and even if it doesn't come to fruition, although I think it's very sincere, this is a lot like Trump saying he wants to buy Greenland. I just think the idea of putting Trump's face on money, the idea that there would be members of the Democrat Party and the media that would, the wealthiest, by the way, I mean, the wealthiest people in the country are Democrats. Wouldn't it be funny to see the wealthiest people in the country, Democrat voters, carrying around Donald Trump on their money? Don't you know that's ultimately what it's really all about? They can't imagine currency they would actually have to use in stores and other places, sending, cash to your niece who just graduated or whatever, and Trump's face is on the money. I love that. I don't know whether it's real or not. I mean, it is an actual law. If you didn't know, the U.S. Treasury has designed the $250 bill featuring President Trump's image. The plan, of course, can't move forward unless it's approved by Congress, as Bessent just said. Treasury can't produce currency featuring a living person. That's another rule, which I didn't know. Did you know that? Treasury cannot produce currency unless the person on it is dead. So Bessent said there is legislation that has been introduced in Congress that would allow a living person